Reference answers the first of our 5 questions. What is this about? And we can ask this question of all forms of meaning in isolation or in their multimodal combination. We are going to explore 3 major aspects of reference now: specification, circumstances, and properties. Specification refers to whether something is an instance, an absence, or a concept. An instance is a singular thing. Here I am, Mary Calancis, you can see me on this video, and you are unlikely to argue that I don't exist. In referring to me, a whole lot of multimodal corroborations are going on between the text on the title slide of this video, on this record of my speech, my body, and what you can see now. There is just one of me. You are not going to argue with that either, though I do happen to have a granddaughter who has the same name. Much of the time, text or speech is not enough to achieve specification. This is why, in order to make a reliable meaning, we need multimodal transposition of the kind you are experiencing in this video. You've got the video recording of me beside my name to distinguish me from all the other Mary Calancises in the world. However, there is always a chance that I will be absent when I miss a meeting, or when someone deliberately doesn't invite me to something, or when you remember that you have forgotten me. Absence is meaningful non-presence. Of course, there are an infinite number of absences which are completely irrelevant. You wouldn't care to wonder whether I was missing from the moon. I'm sure that's not an absence that would normally cross anyone's mind. Although this otherwise unmeaningful non-presence I have just made into a meaningful absence by creating it as a silly example. Absence is a tricky thing. You never know where these transpositions can take you. Then, let's imagine there was a Mary Calancis in a novel or a movie. That would be an interesting kind of absence, the extent to which the character was based on my life in part or not at all, or a character like me but with a different name. There are many interesting absences like these in novels and movies. They're full of them all the time. Fictional presences and, strangely, absences as well. This is the point we want to make about transposition. Instance and absence are not clearly distinct and different things. They don't sit in a system of stable contrasts. There is a dynamic connection between the two. The one is always about to become the other, and there are many complicated and ambiguous places along the way. Here are some different kinds of absence across the forms of meaning. Ellipses in text, sometimes marked with 3 little dots to tell you something has been left out. Blank spaces in images, and of course blanks are meaningful absences. So are empty places in space, objects that are missing, persons who are absent, silences between sounds, and things left unsaid. And another transposition in the specification of me, deceptively profound and deceptively important. I am an instance of a person. I am one of the over 7 billion people alive today. I just looked up the world population clock, and here's the number of people on Earth at the fractional second I took this screenshot. The numbers are spinning forward at a dizzying speed. Here's me as an instance. You're looking at me on this video, but the people who made this graphic meant to include me too, because if you had the time to keep scrolling down, you'd see everyone. I must be somewhere there, though one of the things about concepts is that instances often tend to get lost in the crowd. So I have a double life, as an instant and as a concept. Someone is always about to make me into a concept, a change that can be made in the meaning of me. In the specification of me, I am both things at the same time. And of course, I want to be both, me and a person. I am both these things. I am Mary Calancis in my singularity, but a person in my generality. I want to be able to move between these meanings. These are 2 aspects of me, but quite fundamentally different aspects, or we would say functionally grammatically different. These are two fundamentally different aspects of specification. Or to turn them into actions, I can be conceptualized as a person, but as a person, I can be instantiated as Mary Calancis. If I was to apply old-fashioned grammar to this, here I am on the right side of your screen, and you can specify me with a proper noun, or you can refer to me as she in the singular. On the left side of the screen, somewhere in the crowd, I have been specified as a concept, a common noun, person in the plural. When it comes to imaging, I can make the same grammatical move. The person you see on the right side of the screen is me, incontrovertibly instantiated. But even though it is impossible to find me on the left side of the screen, the repeated icons of persons capture an image, the conceptual characteristics of peopleness, and I share that with 7 billion and something others. This is an example of how in the pattern language we are creating in this multimodal grammar, we can use text and image to differentiate instant and concept. Here you see me as an instance on the right and as a concept on the left.
Here now is a rough map of how specification happens across all the forms of meaning, most of the time in multimodal combination. Because one form of meaning is rarely enough, we mostly need to transpose in order to make meaning. We say this map is rough because our aim in this grammar is to sketch out our pattern language in broad brushstrokes. There is a lot more that could be done to think through and provide detailed examples across all these forms of meaning. So we instantiate in text with proper nouns, the definite article the, and the singular form of the noun or a noun phrase. Now here's an example from the digital world. In our grammatical terms, alphanumeric identifiers are text too. For example, here's the practically unspeakable number for the scan of your bag when you go through and you're checking it in at the airport. Or to put it this way, you could read out the numbers if you wanted to, but that's reading. It's a multimodal practice and not speaking in the ordinary sense of spontaneous speech. Remember our definition of text? Anything that can be written in Unicode. Then here's the instantiation that's going on here. This is just one bag. This is your bag. It's one bag alone among millions that are being moved around every day, all with unique features, no matter how frustratingly hard these sometimes are to work out when you're standing by the luggage belt. Then to conceptualize, if we use old-fashioned grammar to do this, the old-fashioned grammar of text, we had nouns, we had the indefinite article a, and we had the plural form of a noun or phrase. But in our digital world, we can also use alphanumeric names to classify things. If you take the instance of a can of sardines in this picture here, and when you go to the checkout in the supermarket, the number that goes with the barcode classifies it as a kind of thing by its product number. It's a very specific kind of thing. It's this particular brand of sardines. But nevertheless, it's a general thing because there are thousands of these cans. This can's been instantiated many, many times. So in this case, the system of alphanumeric naming is performing the function of conceptualization. And a practical machine transposition also happens here, from the image of the barcode to the text that the computer reads to the product name that comes up on your receipt when you leave the supermarket.
In image, pictures can be of a single thing, also an instance, or represent a kind of thing, also a concept. Here the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre is speaking to someone else on the Pont des Arts in Paris. This picture is from a famous book of photographs by Henri Cartier-Bresson, published in 1952. This is Sartre unequivocally instantiated. And now this is a graphic created by Otto Neurath and Marie Reidemaster in the 1930s for their Museum of Society and Economy in Vienna. Each small child represents 1,000 kindergarten children served school meals each day. The larger child, older school children. These are persons conceptualized in image. This kind of distinction may be clearer in image than in text. Neurath and Reidemaster are famous for having invented this kind of abstract iconography. This is a kitchen conceptualized. We can rearrange the iconically represented parts if we were planning to instantiate for the redesign of a kitchen. By contrast with the previous conceptualization of space, there's no denying that this is a picture of a kitchen, instantiated. Speech is rarely this clear. How definite is the definite article in "meet me in the kitchen"? Kitchen instantiated compared to. The kitchen is my favorite room in the house, which could refer to my like for kitchens in general, as well as for this particular kitchen. Transpositions like this make up for the uncertainties of speech.
Now in space we might have a particular church, a particular school, a particular park. But as soon as we're considering more than one, we connect them with concepts of church, school or park, or railway stations. But always these are unique places that might look in a photograph uniquely like this particular station where you or I or Philip Larkin might agree to meet. Though conceptualising, we can identify railway stations in general conceptually by what they do. This will help us find a particular station that we've never been to before.
And so on across all our forms of meaning. This object versus a kind of object, your personal style versus kinds of gestures or appearances, the sound of this ringtone in a phone compared to ringtones in general. This speech act is a uniquely voiced meaning versus the repeatable concept of denial.
Now, why is this important? One of the unfortunate aspects of putting text and image together into an explanatory diagram, like the one that you're just looking at now, is that we've needed to put ideas in places that seem to be mutually exclusive. This is how Ferdinand de Saussure generated his insights about language when he created something that is today called structuralism. There's also a whole series of problems that are created with this notion of a system. Things are never clearly separated. They're never this stable. The diagram like this is a trap. This is why we're taking you through this diagram, to say some things in speech that the diagram can't say for us. And what we're saying is this: there is a constant movement between these things, and the movement is what we call transposition. We're going to give you two reasons why transposition is important. The one is technical and the other is humanistic. The technical reason is that in the digital world, meanings are a lot of the time generated from relational databases. Facebook, Twitter, they're everywhere. There's databases down the back of what's happening and what you're seeing on the screen. So in these environments, the column head in the database, which you need to consider as like a table structure essentially, is a concept, or for that matter, the row, the label on the row as well. Then the cell of the table is the instance. The column may say person's name, for example, and then the cells in the column below, we might have people's names, including maybe Mary Calancis, maybe Bill Cope. Environments like Facebook and Twitter and Amazon, which operate off relational databases, these all have our names in this kind of a structure. And this is how in digital text we can distinguish between the bill, something you've got to pay, and Bill who gets the bill. So what we do is we have this kind of layering of concepts and instances all the time, which is how these meanings are made. Grammatically, digital databases and digital environments operate on this concept instance distinction. So digital text then is driven by ontologies, which among other things are continually aligning instances and concepts. This is transposition with mechanical support.
There's a humanistic reason as well why we want this concept of transposition. Of course, in my personhood, I am to be counted in a community or a species, but please don't reduce me to a number. I want to be one of many, and this is without prejudice to my being myself. I want to be both meanings at the same time and to shift my meaning as I feel I need to. This is how we live our meanings, shifting between instantness and conceptness. This is how we move between the general and the particular. There is nothing particularly languagey about this. In fact, we've seen that language alone doesn't do such a great job of specification, grammatically speaking. It's an existential thing, an ontological thing that we live in every fibre of our bodies, our selfhood instantiating and our personhood conceptualizing, transposing these meanings. From embodied feelings to images to speech to text and the other forms we have for meaning ourselves.